Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf mem dalet of Bava Metzia. We are at the Mishnah at the bottom of mem gimel amabet. Third day in a row, we get to start with the Mishnah. So again, we'll dive right in. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get going. So the Mishnah is going to address whether thought or speech, we'll see that there's a discussion as to which one it's talking about, may constitute action. So let's take a look. If you think to that you're going to send your hand to the item that's being watched. Now, you in this case is a custodian, is the watcher. So, and l'shloach yad is basically means misappropriate. It means that you're going to take it when you don't have the right to. So now you just thinking about it. Now, Rashi immediately tells us that it doesn't mean just thinking about it. Take a look at Rashi. Amar, you say bifnei edim, in front of witnesses. Atopik don't know shel ploni la'atzmi. I'm going to take this item that I'm watching, this deposit that has been given to me, and that belongs to somebody else. La'atzmi, for myself. So there's a statement inside, and Tosfos helps us understand why. So again, bottom Tosfos in the daf, hachoshev l'shloach yad, hach machshava. This reference to thought, havi dibur. It's referring to speech. Kediyala, as we are about to learn at the beginning of the Gemara, may al kol davar pesha. From the term al kol davar pesha that we're going to see, it relates to one misappropriating an action. So the word davar there is being understood as speech. And similarly, when it comes to pigel, that's the thought to say that you are going to use it outside, use a korban outside the proper time. So nami havi b'dibur, that also refers to doing it with speech, below believe, and not just in the heart. Nishkat, Nizakin, Makomos Acherim Pirashti. So the point is that in a lot of different places, you can see that when it comes to pigel, it actually means thought. Doesn't mean thought alone. It means thought with speech. There needs to be some level of affirmative action. Okay. So what happens if you do that? So that's the background to know that we're talking about speech and not just thought. But what happens? Beis Shammai says you're liable as soon as you've done that. As Rashi says, chayav ba'onsin. If something happens, an unavoidable accident happens to the item, mehayom, you're going to be liable from today, v'hala, and onwards. And if something bad happens that you would not have been responsible for otherwise, you are going to be responsible for it. Because remember, we're talking about now presumably a unpaid watcher, so he's not even obligated if it was lost or if it was stolen. But yet here now, because he did this, he just had this thought, he is going to be responsible even if it was completely beyond his control. Okay. But Beis Hillel says no. You have to actually send your hand out to take it. You have to actually do that. Just thinking about it, even speaking about it, is not enough. Shneamar im lo shalach yad b'melechas b're'ehu. That what is the oath that one makes? One makes the oath, or I'm sorry, or when is it that one is not liable? One's not liable if, in fact, he did not actually send his hand to the item. As the full pasuk is, im lo yimatzeh haganav, if you don't find the thief, v'nikrav bal habayas el ha'elohim, and the owner comes to the judges, im lo shalach yado b'melechas re'ehu. So we need to and we confirm that the person who was watching it didn't send his hand to the item to and thereby become liable. So that's Beis Hillel's understanding. So he taught es hachavis. What happens if you don't actually take the item, but you tilt the item. So as a result, you have this barrel of wine that's been entrusted to you, and you tilt it so it's never leaving the ground. You never actually pick it up, and you don't even drag it. You just tilt it a little bit so that you can get the amount of wine that you want to get out. And so you take out a revius, vinishbra, and now it breaks at some. And Rashi says vinishbra la'achar after some time. It didn't have anything to do, or didn't have any clear relationship between what you did and the fact that it broke. So then, Eino Mishalam Ella Revius. The only thing you have to pay for is the Revius that you stole. You took a Revius, that's what you have to pay for. Rashi explains, second of the wide lines at the bottom, Rashi, the Shlichus Yad Eino Mitchayev Be'onsin. Just the fact that you sent your hand to this item doesn't result in you being liable for unavoidable accidents. Ad sheyimshoch, until you actually drag it, o yagbia, or you lift it, dahavi kiniya, because that constitutes a kinyan. And we're going to see that the next parak, which we'll get to today, really on some level could be seen as tied to our current parak based on this idea of saying what is a kinyan and what are its ramifications. So here we're hearing one ramification of a kinyan, and that is that if you make a kinyan and in a shloach yad kind of situation, in a misappropriate situation, that's when you become liable for anything that happens to it. Higbiya v'natal hemenu revius. However, that was where you tilted it. You never lifted it. Now, if you actually lift it, v'nishbara, and it breaks, misham d'mei you have to pay for the whole thing. So that is the Mishnah. Now,
isn't onsen, isn't that a chiyuv by a shoel?
By a shoel, yes, it is a chiyuv by a shoel.
Is it? But by a shomer chinam, is a shomer chinam really chayav b'onsen?
No, of course not. The reason that you're chayav in those
we're comparing this to. I thought I heard you say we're comparing this to a shomer chinam.
The person is a shomer chinam. The issue is that he's now misappropriated and taken something that doesn't belong to him. So he's become a thief. And so as a result of his misappropriation, now he is subject to liability for onsin. That's exactly right. So minahani mili, how do we know that all of these words, meaning how do we know both the opinion of Beit Shammai and the opinion of Beit Hillel? Well, the good news is we've got a brisa that tells us. So to Tana Rabbanan, we got a brisa. Al kol davar pesha, the fact that we have this reference to davar, even though davar in that pasuk is clearly not talking about speech, it's talking about things. Things can be used. The word thing is davar, everything. Kol davar is everything. So Beit Shammai says, but based on that almost like pun, we would say melamed shechayav al hamachshava kamasa. You're liable for thought just as you're liable for action. And of course, the thought that we're talking about is speech. Beis Hillel says einu chayav ad sheyishloach bo yad. No, you're not liable until you actually take it. You have to actually do an action, and speech is not enough. Shenemar imlo shalach yado b'melechas rayehu. Because if you didn't, because again, that same pasuk that we cited in the Mishnah, that you have to have actually taken the item. Amr lahen Beis Shammai leBeis Hillel. So Beis Shammai says to Beis Hillel, v'halo kvar ne'amar al kol davar pesha. 1 second. Even though it says, it already said, suggesting that it was early in the Torah, it's not actually true. The al kol davar pesha is the following pasuk. That's pasuk Perak Shmot Perak Kaf Bet pasuk Chet, and it's the previous pasuk Perak Kaf Bet pasuk Zayin that is that says Imlo Shalach Yado b'Melechas Rayehu. So, but in any event, the point is that we already have that teaching. Why do we need both? So obviously, the point that Beit Shammai is making is we have both in order to tell us the fact that it's even if you just intent is sufficient. So Amr lahen Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. So Beis Hillel explains to Beis Shammai, v'halo kvar ne'amar im lo shalach yado b'melechas rayehu. 1 second, I tell you that it already says that you have to have used the item. So im kain Talmud lomer al kol devar pesha. So what do we do with the al kol devar pesha? So shiyakol, I might have thought ainly Elahu, that the only person who's liable is the person himself, the watcher himself who does it. But Amar la'avdo ulashlucho minayin. How do I know that if I am watching this computer on behalf of Stan, if I send my adult child to go and take the computer and to take it for me, that I am going to be liable for that, even though we have a general principle of ein shlichus ledvar avera, ein shliach ledvar avera, we're going to say, so Talmud lomar al kol davar pesha. So that's how we're going to learn it, is because it says al kol davar pesha, that it's an expansion of the liability. So that's exactly the point. And this is one of the, oh, I didn't finish the note. I apologize. So this is an exception to the concept that an agent cannot cause us to sin. That we saw, I think, yesterday, the concept in connection with Me'ila, with respect to if, for example, where the treasurer of the Beis Hamikdash left money with a money changer, but he left it in a manner that essentially gave permission to the money changer to use it. We say that that as soon as the money changer uses it, or maybe even as soon as the money changer gets the money, because he has the right to use it, the treasurer has engaged in me'ila, even though he didn't actually use the money. It was the money changer who used the money. So again, it's another situation where somebody else could do the action and you could be liable. Okay, so those are two important exceptions. So Amrulahen, so next, so that is point number 2 for today. Now the Gemara is going to narrow the limitation of liability when one only tilts the keg. So hita tachavit, we said if you tilt it, that you're only liable for the revius. Amar Rabba says lo shanu elish nishbra. That's only true if it became broke, if the keg broke, if the barrel broke as a result of at a later time. Aval hichmitza, if it actually turned to vinegar, mishalem es kula, then you actually have to pay for the whole thing, because my timer. What's the reason? Gire didehu de ahanula. It was his arrow that caused it. And this is based on the concept of the following. They understood, I don't know whether this is actually true, they understood that basically a full barrel is less likely to become like vinegar than a barrel that has air in it. That the more air it has in it, the more likely it's going to become vinegar. And that may be true. That's I have no idea, but let's assume that it's true. And so that's the reason that, in fact, if you take out some of the wine and now the rest of the wine spoils, you're going to be liable for it because you effectively caused that spoilage. All right. So now we said that if you lifted it and then took it, then you're going to be responsible for the whole thing. So now we're going to expand the liability associated with that, because lo natal mamish, that when we say that you took it, you didn't actually have to take it. As soon as you lifted it in order to take it, you're going to be liable. Even as long as you lifted it, because that's the act of kinyan, you are going to be liable, even if you didn't actually end up yet pouring it out. So you're about to steal it, and then in walks the owner, and you're like, "Oh boy, I feel guilty. I put it right back down." It's already too late. You're now liable for anything bad that happens associated with it. So lema kasaver shmuel shlichus yad eina tzrichus chisaron. 1 second, maybe this tells us that we can learn a halacha associated with this, or at least the position of Shmuel associated with this. That maybe what it's telling us is you don't have to have any loss in order for a misappropriation to be triggered. But the answer is Amri Lo. No, it doesn't have to be that doesn't have to be true, because Shani Haka, we could understand that this case might be different, because the Nikolai, it's actually good for the guy. Here, what did he pick it up to do? He picked it up in order to take out a revius. But you could imagine in his head that he picked it up to take out the revius, and then he said to himself, you know what? I'm not actually thirsty at the moment. What's the best place for me to store that revius that I've stolen? Right here in this barrel. So I'm going to put it right back down. Because what did we just see? We saw that if you actually have it outside and it's open to the air, you're actually going to it's going to spoil. So as the result, so it's good for him that he leaves it there. Kula. He wants to keep the entire keg full. So buses laha revius, because by keeping it full, he's making that his own revius that he has now stolen better in general. And Rashi explains that what's going on here is it's as if he took out the revius and put it back in. So if you actually lift it, so we're going to treat you as if you took it out and put it back in, because that was what you were intending to do. And so therefore, you will be liable even if you were never given the opportunity to actually pour it out. Okay, so by Rav Ashi now asks, how about once we say that we've got that situation with respect to wine, what about other things? Would we apply the same principle when it comes to a some kind of a purse that is holding money? So litol hemeno dinar, you're thinking about taking 1 dinar out of it. So mahu, what is it? What's the rule? Do we say chamrahu delo mintar ella agav chamra, that when it comes to wine, that's where we would say that the wine helps the other wine, but aval zuza mintar, but when it comes to a single coin, it's easy to watch on its own, and therefore there's no extra fear associated with it. Odilma shining into Rusa de Arniki, into Rusa de Dinar. Or do we look at the aggregate picture and say, hey, it's easier to watch a wallet than it is to watch a quarter? Because think about it. Which do you lose more frequently out of your pocket? A quarter, some coin, single coin, or your entire wallet? You're much more likely to notice your entire wallet missing than a single coin. So as a result, although it's a good question, we don't have a great answer. Teku, we are going to leave that question unresolved. Okay, so it's seen. Okay, so now we are ready to. So hadron alach mahamafkid, hadron alach mafkid, hadron alach mafkid. We are now finished with the 3rd chapter, and this brings us to the 4th chapter of Maseches Bava Metzia. Now, the 4th chapter of Maseches Bava Metzia discusses acquisitions. I mentioned that we're going to be talking about these kind of a kinyan, and we're going to deal with it initially in the context of an exchange of currencies. And the question is, so let's just go over my, in brief, we're going to see that an acquisition is only finalized when a kinyan, an act of possession, is made on the item being acquired. Even if money has not yet changed hands, the seller acquires the payment. So let's go through the possibility. On the other hand, let's finish it out, and then we'll go through the possibilities. We'll do an example. On the other hand, the changing of hands of the payment is not sufficient. Okay, so let's go through. So I decide that I'm going to buy the Gemara that Stan is using at the moment. Let's assume that he owns it. And so I give him $10 for that Gemara. He says, that's a great deal. I'll take it. I hand him the $10. I do not yet own the Gemara. I have to lift the Gemara and make a kinyan on it. And if one of us wants to undo it, it's undone. On the other hand, again, I want to buy the Gemara from Stan for $10. I've got the $10 in my pocket, and now I lift up the Gemara and I take it from him. As soon as I've done so, Stan effectively acquires the money. I owe him now the money, and there's nothing either of us can do to undo it. Both of us have an obligation to follow through with the transaction. Obviously, we can jointly agree that we want to go back, but it's effectively like we are selling it, that I'm selling it back to him. It's not, I've already, the first transaction is complete. So now what happens if one's exchanging two currencies? Which item is considered the item being acquired and which item is considered the payment? That's the topic that begins our fourth chapter. So let's take a look. Hazahav pone es hakesef. When you make an acquisition on gold, okay, we're doing an exchange of gold and silver coins. If I'm giving you the silver coins and now I pick up the gold coins, you have acquired the silver coins because the silver coins are the currency and the gold coins are referred to as the payrote, as the fruit. Okay, the fruit is considered the item that's being acquired, and the currency is the item that's being used to pay. So gold, if I now pick up the gold that I'm buying, the silver passes hands to Stan. Okay, Stan and I are going to be doing all the transactions today. From this point on. Hakesef ain't no. But if Stan picks up the silver that I'm giving him, the transaction is not complete. I have not acquired the gold, and Stan has not conveyed the gold. I still have to pick up the gold. Okay, what about, and let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi goes through everything so we can go through it quickly, but we'll do it because I think it'll be helpful. So hazav kones kesef halokech dinarei zahav tuvuim b'dinarei kesef. So you're buying gold coins in exchange for silver coins. V'nasomo dinarei zahav. Now the person who's selling the gold coins hands over meshichat hazav, the dragging of those gold coins, kone es hakesef, results in the person who conveyed the gold coins acquiring the silver. Okay. Lebal hazahav, to the one who owned the gold. V'nitchayev lo zeh mishakibel dinari zahav, and the person who owns the silver coins is liable to the owner of the gold coins for those silver coins. L'teit lo dinarei hakesef, to give him the silver coins. Ve'enu yakol lachzor bo, he can't do backsies. There's no going back on the transaction by either party. Aval hakesef, when it comes to the silver, eno kona esazav, it does not trigger the same transaction with respect to the gold. She'im nasan lo dinarei hakesef techila, if I give Stan the silver coins in the beginning, lo kana, he has not acquired the gold. He has not made me acquire the gold. And either one of the two of them are able to go back. Because the form of the silver is the money, because it's the one that is, we're going to see that charifi means literally sharp, but basically it means that that's the item that is the more liquid, more used in transactions item. Linasein bahotza, that's the one that's more out there. V'dinar zahav eno ela kishar metaltalin. In this upeiros, and this gold in this transaction is just like other movable objects and fruit. It's the fruit. Again, we're going to be using the terms ma'os, money, and peiros, fruit. Fruit causes money to change hands. Money does not cause fruit to change hands. Umos eno konos. Money does not cause a transaction. Ad sheyim shocham metaltalin, until the movable object is actually dragged. But on the other hand, the dragging of the movable object, kona, does cause the money to transfer. And therefore neither of the people are able to go back and do backsies. And the Gemara is going to explain the reasoning here. And there's going to be two versions. There's some people who say that Mashicha is a biblical transaction, and that's why you need to have some Mashicha. And there are others who are going to say that there's actually a rabbinic decree. And the rabbinic decree, just to foreshadow it, is that if I pay you money and you still owe me the object, and now it's as if wherever that object is, it's as if I already own it, but it's in your possession. Right. What is your incentive associated with protecting that item. Very little. And so the rabbi said, we're not going to allow that kind of situation. We don't want sellers to have no incentive to watch over the items that they have sold. And so as a result, you need to actually take possession of the item in order to effectuate the transaction. Okay, so that's the Rashi on the first part. That's going to be the rest of this is going to follow clearly. We say
is the gold considered a an object of treasure, let's say, an object like you said, the peyrot, or is it can it be considered as money in its own right?
Excellent question. That is going to be the fundamental issue that we're going to be discussing throughout much of the Gemara today. The simple answer is that relative to the kesef, it's peyrot, it's fruit. How it would be treated in a different transaction may be something different.
If someone is buying euros today with dollars or pesos or whatever it may be, then both of those are
correct
monetary objects. But if someone wants to buy a euro and plaster it on his wall as a picture, show this is what a euro is, maybe it's not considered money.
So what we would say in each of those transactions, we would ask which is the more liquid asset, and that will be the money, and the less liquid asset. So I believe more dollars change hands than euros. So as a result, the dollar would be the liquid item, and it would be the cash, and the euro in that transaction would be the payros. And that's what we're saying here. That even if you might say, and we'll see that there's going to be a clear opinion that gold is considered a money, but even if you say that, we're going to see that in this situation, we're going to treat gold as the object, as the payrote, as the metaltalon, as the item being acquired. And now let's just take a look. It doesn't have to be that that the item that's being acquired is worth more. It could be that it's worth less. If you're exchanging silver and copper, the acquisition, the lifting of the copper will cause the silver to change hands. Because again, the silver is more liquid, and therefore that's the money, and therefore it cannot be used to acquire anything else. But when you pick up the other object, the silver will change hands. Ma'os haraos, bad money, kona es hayafos, will acquire good money. Because again, good money is what's the exchanged item. V'hayafos eino kona es haros. And just giving over the good money does not acquire the bad money, because the good money is the liquid item. It's the money in that. And the other, the raos, is the payros. Asimon, a slug, kona es hamatbeya, will acquire any kind of formed coin. Bahamatbeya, but a formed coin, which is again, by definition, going to be the exchangeable asset. Eino kona es asimon. If you have just a slug before it's been stamped with the face of the of royalty or whatever you're going to put on the coin, it's before it's been minted. It's not. That's going to be the object of the acquisition. So if you lift that up, the cash passes automatically. But if you lift the cash, the asimon does not pass, even though an asimon is going to be money. Metaltalin, konen es matbeya, matbeya ain't a konen es metaltalin. As we get to more general rules, the movable object acquires the coinage. The coinage does not acquire the movable object. Kol ha-metaltalin, konen zed. And you know what? When you have two things that are not money, then both things can serve as the means of transfer. So if I trade volume 1 of Maseches Bava Metzia for now volume 2, as we've entered volume 2, and either Stan or I could pick up the volume that we're acquiring, and the other one would be effectively transferred as a result. So, Ketzad, give me an example. Mashach imenu peros lo nasan lo maos eno yachol lahachzor bo. So let's go and to the details of this. If I lift up the fruit and I have not given the money, eno yachol lahachzor bo, neither of us can go back on the deal. Nasan lo maos, if Stan has given me the money, I'm sorry, I've given Stan the money, below mashach imenu peros, and I haven't taken the fruit, yachol lahachzor bo. We can both go back on it. But, and this is a very important line, because we are going to be citing this line throughout much of the rest of this parak. So it's important to remember this line about Amru. But what do we say about somebody who goes back on a transaction after cash has already transferred? This is basically saying, you may have a legal right to do something, but sometimes the legal right is the wrong. And so what do we say about somebody? Mishapara, the one who paid back, Me'anshe Dor Hamabel, namely God, the one who paid back the people who were in the generation of the flood, Umidor Haflaga, and for the generation of the building of the Tower of Bavel and the dispersion of all the people with all the different languages. In both cases, people didn't care about others. We have at the end of Parshas Bereshis the fact that they were engaging in Hamas, cruelty to one another. It's irony that Hamas has that connotation. So here in the age of the building of the Tower of Babel, the famous Midrash, I believe it is, says that they cared more about when somebody would fall off the building and fall to their death. They cared about the brick that the person lost with them, as opposed to the life that was lost. So when you don't care about somebody, God will exact retribution. Will basically para often means to pay. So he'll exact payment from them. Hu asad lihi para mimi she'eno omer b'diburo. So too, God will exact retribution on those who don't fulfill their word. So that line, Mishapara, we are going to reference as Mishapara on a regular basis over the next couple of days and maybe even weeks. So Rabbi Shimon Omer, Shekol Shakesef Yado, Yado Al Ha'elyona, that anybody who's holding the money, he has the advantage. So he disagrees to somewhat. So let's take a look at Rashi, because Rashi explains it. Halagad Rabbanan, he disagrees with the rabbis. Da Amre Nasan Lo Maos, Yachol Lachzer Bo, that we said that if I give money to buy fruit from Stan, but I have not taken the fruit, we say that I also have the right, both of us have the right to undo the transaction. Rabbi Shimon disagrees with that principle. And he says the right, because we say the afilu lokeach, even the purchaser has that right according to the rabbis. But us the Rabbi Shimon, and comes Rabbi Shimon lamemar mocher, only the seller has the right. Shak kol biyado, because at the time, once I've given the money to Stan, he's holding both the money and the fruit. So as a result, who the biyado, who the yachol laxerbo, he's the only one who can undo it. Avalokeach, me, I have no ein yachol laxerbo. I have no right to undo it because I'm not holding the money and I'm not holding the fruit. We'll be Gemara first time, and the Gemara we're going to explain his reasoning. Okay, so that is Rabbi Shimon. So now the Gemara explains that there are actually two versions of our Mishnah. Our Mishnah literally said gold acquires silver, but we're going to see that there was another version that said silver acquires gold. And this will touch on exactly the issue that Ken raised. Is gold considered coinage, currency? Exactly. And we're going to then cite three other people who may have believed that gold was considered coinage. And we will end today by saying that actually the third of them is a decent proof that gold is coinage. So let's go through and let's take a look. So we turn, we're at the Gemara near the bottom of Mendal and Aleph, and we say, Masli le Rabbi Shimon Brei. Rabbi taught his son, Rabbi Shimon, Hazahav Kona es HaKesef. So gold acquires silver. Amarlo. So Rabbi Shimon said back to his dad, Rabbi, my teacher. So it's, first of all, it shows that he didn't call him Avi. He didn't call him my father. So there's some potential lessons there. But anyway, Shanisa Lanu, you taught us. Maybe it was in the yeshiva. So as a result, he's in the yeshiva. He said referred to him as his teacher. But anyway, you taught us Biyal Dusecha when you were younger. Hakezav Kona as Hazab. You taught it the other way around. That silver acquires gold. That gold is the currency and silver is the payros. B'taxor v'tishna lana b'zinusecha hazav kones kesav, and now you're reversing it. So which one is it? So So what was it that Rebbe was thinking when he was younger, and what was he thinking when he was older? That he thought that the one that was more important, more valuable, that's the one that's considered the money. Aspa de lo chashiv havi pera, and therefore the silver, which is less valuable, that's going to be the produce. The kani le pera the tiva, and therefore gold acquires the silver is the produce. It will acquire the gold. V'zeknusa savar b'katva, as we turn to Memdal and Rambetz, decharif havi tiva. That when he got older, he realized that it's the item that's more liquid, as Rashi says, decharif, in his translation of what does it mean to be sharp, yotze behotza, it goes out. It's the current currency, but over lasocher, and every seller will accept it. Every business person will accept it. Dehavad lo charif havi pera, and the thing that is not considered as liquid is going to be the produce. And therefore the gold is going to acquire the silver. So 3 efforts to show that gold is also money. So Amar Rav Ashi Kiyal Duse Mistabra, it makes more sense to say that the way Rebbe said in his youth, namely that gold, that silver acquires gold, and that silver is the payros and gold is the maos. Because what was the second part of our Mishnah? We said copper acquires silver. Now, copper is, if in fact we focus on the fact that it is, we go by based on what is the most liquid item, why did we need to teach that? We'll see. Because because if you tell me that silver is the produce and gold is the money, that's why we need to say that copper acquires silver. That even though when it comes to gold, silver is the produce, when it comes to copper, it's considered the money. But if you tell me that silver is the money relative to gold, which is more valuable, and you're telling me that even though gold is the thing that's more valuable, silver is the one that's considered the money, when it comes to copper, when you have silver is both more valuable and more liquid, do we have to even tell us it? Of course, copper will be the peyrot and silver will be the ma'ot. So no, this proof is not a great proof to tell us that gold should be the one that is the currency, because itzrich, you would still need to tell me, even if we say that gold acquires silver, as we have in the actual Mishnah that we have, we need to tell me that copper acquires silver. Because I might have thought hani prite de asra de sagye inhu charife tfei mikaspa, that I would have thought that in places where copper does circulate, because copper is the less valuable coin, it probably has even greater circulation than the more expensive coin. ema tavahavi. So maybe I might think that in those places the copper should be considered money relative to silver, and the silver should be considered the payros. Kamash Milan comes to teach us Kaven de ikaduchta de lo sagibe, because there are places where the lower value coins don't even circulate because inflation essentially made those coins worthless. Pay Rahabi. We're going to always treat the copper coins as produce relative to silver coins. Okay, so we do need to teach it, and it's not a good proof. So now effort number 2. Maybe we could say that even Rabbi Chia holds that gold is considered the money and silver should be considered the payroll, as Rebbe held when and taught when he was younger. The Rav Ozif dinare b'brate de Rebbe Chia, because Rav once borrowed some gold dinarim from Rebbe Chia's daughter. L'sof iyakar dinare, and then the gold coins went up in value. Asala kamei de Rebbe Chia, and he came in front of Rebbe Chia. Amrle zil shleim la tavin utkilin. You have to just give her the full regular weight of the coins that you borrowed, meaning you borrowed 10 gold coins, you need to give her 10 gold coins. Now, this is going to introduce an interesting topic that we'll be discussing more in Perek, in the 5th Perek of Bava Metzia, but the topic of ribis. Now, ribis is ordinarily when I lend you money and then you pay me back more than I lent you. But the rabbis made a rule that when it comes to borrowing objects, especially commodity objects that are sold in the marketplace, we are not going to allow you to borrow we're going to discourage that kind of borrowing, and we're going to limit it to certain situations. And the reason we're going to limit it is the following. What happens if I borrow a bushel of apples from you today, and the apples are worth $1 today, a pound? But now I come to pay you back, and the apples are worth $1.25 a pound. Well, now I borrowed 100 pounds, so I borrowed $100, but now I'm paying you back 125. So it looks like, even though I'm paying you the same, I'm not paying you the same apples, I'm paying you different apples because I ate those apples or sold those apples, etc. But I'm paying you back a bushel that's worth more. That looks like interest, and so we say that you are not allowed to borrow one saw against another saw, one measure of something against another measure of something. That doesn't mean that you can't borrow my Gemara. It doesn't mean so. There's a limit to it, but the bottom line is that we say that you can't borrow things that are going to be where you're not going to return the item itself, right? If I borrow a bushel of whatever produce, I'm not going to return that bushel. It's commodities. Exactly. So no, there are exceptions, and we're going to see an exception very, very shortly. But the point is that Rabbi Chia, by saying that even though the dinarim went up in value, you pay back the original amount, he's telling us that the saw concern about ribis doesn't apply. So doesn't that show, our question is going to be that he must think that the gold coins are money and not payrote. So if you tell me that the gold coins is considered the money shapir, then it's all good because I'm allowed to lend you dollars and you pay me back dollars, even though maybe in the foreign exchange market it fluctuates and now it's worth more. We don't treat that as, we're not going to prohibit that in the prohibition of interest. But again, when it comes to commodities, we will prohibit it. So that's why maybe the reason that Rabbi Chia said it's okay is because that was the situation. But if you're going to tell me that gold is considered fruit, isn't this a prohibited transaction of borrowing grain, of borrowing a saw of grain and paying back a saw of grain. V'asar, and it's forbidden to pay back the same number of gold dinarim if they're now worth more. You have to pay the same value that you would have paid.
Well,
So
that's like
Rab,
trading. It's like trading in the commodities market or
it's
trading in any
exactly right.
market.
Exactly right. So now we're about to so you're going to ask, well, and how could any Jew trade in the commodities market? Well, here's the answer to it, or here's an aspect to the answer, because Rav dinare havelei, Rav actually had dinarim in his possession. So even though he borrowed gold coins, as long as he had some gold coins, we are going to allow him to do that borrowing, because, as Rashi explains, dinari havile. Take a look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, about 16, 17 lines down on Memdal and on Bet in the narrow lines of Rashi. Dinara havile kishalova. When he borrowed his money from the daughter of Rabbi Chia, then he was he had gold coins in his hand. Kishalova at Elu, when he borrowed the other gold coins. The Gabi saw besub. And when it comes to borrowing one saw and paying back another, Tanan, we learned, Aval Omer lo halveni ad sheyovo b'ni. If one says, listen, lend it to me until my son comes, because my son has the key, or knows where he put my bushel of grain. Oh, ad she'emsa hamapteach, or until I find the key. Listen, I have this opportunity. Let me borrow it. I'll give you back. I just don't have my key to my safe at the moment. So I want, but I have it. I'm gonna. So in all those cases, she'elu should be yado niknin lamalva. We're gonna say that it's as if the as if the lender has acquired those items immediately from the borrower. Ubershuzo hikru. And so as a result, although the apples, the gold, whatever it is, went up in value, deribis saw besad derabanan. When it comes to the ribis of saw besad, that's only rabbinic. Lo gazer. And so in this kind of narrow situation, it's not going to be considered a prohibition. And by the way, another important limitation on saw besad is there a market for the item currently in the marketplace, so that you could just basically go out to the marketplace and buy it and sell it right away. So if there is, then we're also going to have a big exception. So that's the big exception that basically swallows commodities markets. But what they're concerned about is outside the commodities trading platform, but rather in the real life situation of borrowing commodities. So anyway, so because of that, so Rab dinare havule, the kaven dahavule dinare nasa kaomer halveni ad sheyava b'nei o ad she'emsa mafteach. So as a result, that's why it's going to be okay, because Rabbi Chia had the coins, so it's effectively just like the situation where he says, "Lend it to me until my son comes. Lend it to me until I find my key." All right, so that was effort number 2. Effort number 3 of showing that maybe there's somebody who holds that gold is money, and this effort's going to be successful. Amareva, hi Tana Savar Dahaba Tivahabi. It seems like the following Tana believes that gold is money. Titania, Pruta Sha'amru Echad Mishmona Be'isar Haitalki. One pruta that we talk about is worth 1/8 of an Italian Isar. Lamainafkamino. What does it matter what the exchange ratio is? Likadusha Isha. If I'm trying to marry a woman, I need at least one pruta, so it needs to be worth at least 1/8 of an Italian Isar. Isar Echad, when it comes to this Isar, that is worth 1 me'esrim ba'arba b'dinar shel kesef. That's worth 1/24 of a silver dinar. So the nafkamina, why do I care what that's worth? If I'm doing business and you pay me a silver dinar for 23 for something that costs 23 isar, so then I have to give you change of 1 isar. So dinar shel kesef echad me'esrim b'chamisha b'dinar shel zahav. If I give a dinar of silver is worth 1/25 of a gold dinar. Again, lamai nafkamina, what does it matter? Lepidyon ben, when it comes to the redeeming of a son. Because a shekel is equal to a sella, and a sella is equal to 4 dinare kesef. So therefore, when we say that you have to give 5 shkalim according to the Torah, that means you have to give 20 dinarim shel kesef, 20 dinar of silver. So what if you instead were to give 1 gold dinar? Well, then that would tell you that in order that the Kohen would need to give back 5 dinar kesef in change.
So what does this prove then?
So a second. So again, Mishaer Tana Bemidi the kits. So in second, given that the Tana said I'm sorry, I skipped a bit. Amrat Bishlama Taba Have. Now, if you tell me that gold is actually considered money, Mishaer Tana Bemidi the kits, it makes sense to have something have a fixed value. But Amrat but if you tell me that gold is considered produce, Misha'er Tana Bamidi de Oker Vizil, if it's produce, then the implication is that its price can go up and down. And so as a result, how could we make a statement that says how much a gold dinar is worth relative to a silver dinar? It should fluctuate with the commodity markets. So Zimnin de Mahadir like Kahana, because sometimes the Kohen will have to give back change. The Zimnin de Moziv Kahana, and sometimes the person who's redeeming the child will have to give more for the Kohen. Ela Shmamina Tabehavi. So doesn't this show that in fact gold is considered a money? So Shmamina, in fact, we have shown that gold is in fact money. So it seems like we've reached a conclusion. But the Gemara is going to continue the effort to see how gold and silver coins relate to one another, regarding which is considered money and which is produce. And we're going to cite a Mishnah with a debate between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. But for that, please stay tuned for tomorrow's daf.
So what is this? What is this? What does this show? How much gold is worth? It's a 1/25th and 1/20, whatever, 1/20th, 1/24th. What is this telling us?
So the idea is that we are fixing the relationship between various commodities. We're fixing how much a pruta, which is copper, is worth relative to silver, which is worth relative to gold. And at the moment, we're saying, 1 second, you told me that gold is considered payros, and yet if it's payros, then that means that it fluctuates. And yet now you're telling me that it's actually money because it doesn't fluctuate. It's got a fixed exchange rate. So doesn't this show that gold is considered money? And we effectively say, yes, it is considered currency. Now, how that all relates to our Mishnah, we haven't yet addressed. But the point is that now, at least at this moment, we've seen that gold can be, in certain circumstances, money. From my perspective, where we're at is that both gold and silver seem to be money, and our Mishnah is telling us how you deal with it in a specific exchange with respect to the kinyanim, and the Mishnah over there is telling us how you deal with it relative to the price that you pay that's associated with it. But we'll see. Again, this is a continuing conversation that I look forward to having as we continue with the 4th chapter of Bava Metzia.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful Shabbos. Looking forward to continuing.
What is the schedule for the weekend? Last weekend it wasn't so clear.
I believe that last weekend I said that last weekend the recording was posted.
Correct. Correct. But the recording started somewhat after the place where you ended last Friday.
That's because he recorded before I did my recording, so he didn't know exactly where to start. So my apologies for that. That I didn't get quite as far as he had anticipated. But I believe that this Shabbos we're going to be doing it on Shabbos before Mincha. But again, that's going to be up to Ellie, and so please check your WhatsApp and email for that detail.
And for Sunday?
And for Sunday, again, usually he does it in the morning at 7:45, But again, because he's sometimes traveling and because he's a doctor, so he has to often change the times. And so again, best to keep an eye out on the WhatsApp.
I couldn't find it last
Ah, okay.
Sunday.
Well, if
Last
you're
Sunday.
not on the WhatsApp, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to stop the recording. Hold on.
Last Sunday I couldn't find it.